Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Boots Riley.
So I have a band called the Coup, and we've been around for 20-something years through a lot of technology and gentrification type changes. And the technology change is one that has really changed our music a lot. These days, you can have a studio on your laptop and just be recording anywhere in your car, in the alley, wherever. But back when we started out in the early 90s, you had to actually go to a studio and do it analog. And these studios cost a lot of money. So we didn't have a lot of money. And we always did the midnight to 8 shift because nobody wanted that time, and that was the cheapest time. And we liked it. I liked it because we come out, it'd be morning time, everybody'd just be waking up, and we'd have a new song. And we went to the studio. Our studio was actually right in this neighborhood in the Tenderloin, and we lived in Oakland, and so every morning we'd drive across the bridge back home. One morning, we're driving back across the bridge. Pam the Funkstress, the Coup's DJ, was driving, and I was sitting in the back with some other folks that had been in the studio, and we realized we left our keyboard player at the studio. And so we needed to turn around, and the only place to turn around on the Bay Bridge is Treasure Island. And at this time, Treasure Island wasn't full of condos like it is right now. It was a naval base. So we got off on Treasure Island, made that turn, and started heading back up the hill towards the bridge, when all of a sudden we hear, woo, woo! And it was the military police stopping us. They stopped us, the cops stopped us and asked us all for our IDs. There were a bunch of us in the car. We all gave them our IDs. They asked Pam for the registration. And I say from the back, registration's in the glove compartment. So somebody opens the glove compartment, and a waterfall of bullets come down. Now, let me explain how those bullets got there. So this was Oakland in the early 1990s, the Bay Area in the early 1990s. And although Oakland was and is kind of known for this media-created image of mass black-on-black violence, what we know is that from CDC statistics is that actually there was less black-on-black murder in the early 1990s than there was in the 50s and 60s. And so, although many people, when they thought of Oakland, were scared of black people, basically, that wasn't what I was afraid of. What I was afraid of were white supremacists. And let me explain further this situation. In the late 80s and early 90s, white supremacist organizations made outward claims that they were going to take back the Bay Area. There was a lynching in the late 80s at the Lafayette BART station. There was an Aryan Woodstock in the early 90s in Napa. There were neo-Nazi rallies in Union Square. This was a time when people like Tom Metzger were in national news, and David Duke could get elected to office. And places like Ocean Beach were not safe for people of color because you'd get stabbed by racist skinheads. So when the white supremacist organizations like Aryan Nation started putting out lists of rappers they thought should be killed, that they weren't going to kill, but they thought they should end up dead. First, when they started putting out these lists, there were rappers like Ice Cube and Chuck D, people who were known for their social justice lyrics. And the Coup, you could say we were about social justice. We were a radical communist group. We still are. And we were a radical communist band with with album titles like Kill My Landlord, Genocide and Juice. Song titles like I Want to Laugh, Love, Fuck, and Drink Liquor and Help the Damn Revolution Come Quicker. White supremacists didn't like us. And we ended up on one of those lists. And it's not a good feeling to know that there are crazy people looking at a list of people that should be killed, and you are one of them. So we bought guns. We did it. We also didn't want to get messed with by the police, so we did it all the way legal. We registered them. We went to the shooting range to make sure we knew what we were doing with them, and we transported them legally when we needed to transport them. That meant carrying it in a locked box while it was unloaded in the trunk of your car. What I didn't realize this morning before I told somebody to open the glove compartment was that we had recently been to the shooting range, and there was a box of bullets that were open, and they came raining down like a waterfall. And they seemed to be going in slow motion, and I feel like I thought the longest oh shit that I could ever think. And in seeming slow motion, the cop pulls out his gun and has it 2 inches from Pam's head and says, "Put your hands up. Everybody put your hands up," which we do. And with the gun 2 inches from her head, Pam is crying. The cop radios in for backup. And in what seems like seconds, 4 or 5 Jeeps full of MPs come, and they jump out of the cars, saying, "Hut, hut, hut, hut," forming a semicircle, holding big machine guns. So we're sitting there with our hands up, and these MPs become the chorus, the answer to the cop's call. So whatever he says, they repeat once or twice. So when he says, "Who has the gun?" they say, "Who has the gun? Who has the gun?" And I realize that my next words could decide whether we live or die. But I know that I have to answer something. So I think very carefully about the words that I will use and which order I will say them in. As I say, "In the trunk, in a locked box, unloaded, there exists a gun. It is registered to my name." And so they say, "Get out of the car, keep your hands up." It's kind of hard to get out of a car with your hands up. But believe me, since I know the stakes, my hands stay up and I figure out how to get out of the car. And I'm standing outside of the car, shaking, with what seems like dozens of machine guns pointed at me, and dozens of MPs looking for whatever action they're going to see today. And the initial cop opens up the trunk. He sees the lockbox. He says, "Where's the key?" I show him the other key. He opens up the lockbox. Still got my hands up. He sees there a gun and a clip, which the clip is what the bullets are kept in. And I say, with my voice shaking, but just trying to get the sound out, "You see, it's unloaded. It's totally legal." And he says, "How do I know that this gun is unloaded?" And I say, "Well, you see the clip right there. You see it's unload it. And he says, how do I know there's not one in the chamber? And I said, well, you could pick it up and open it and look in the chamber. He says, I'm not touching your weapon. I don't know where he's going with this. He says, pick up the gun and show me. I stand there, and he says, pick up the gun. And then his chorus of MPs say, pick up the gun, pick up the gun. He says again, pick up the gun. And they say, pick up the gun, pick up the gun. Pam yells, don't pick up the gun. I say, I'm not picking up the gun. And then he says again, pick up the gun, pick up the gun. And I notice that one of the MPs has tears coming out of his eyes while he's yelling for me to pick up the gun. And then that makes tears come out of my eyes because this is it. And after a couple more times of him saying, pick up the gun, I say, just take me to jail. Just take me to jail. I'm not touching the gun. I'm not touching the gun. Take me to jail. And I see a look. Maybe it's defeat or something. Maybe it's just contempt in his eyes as he says, get in the car. So I get back in the car. And he goes over and conferences with the other MPs and comes back, hands us back our licenses and says, look, you all have traffic warrants, so we could be taking you to jail. But as a courtesy, we're going to let you go because this has just been a misunderstanding, a bad situation here. So I don't really want to argue because I just want to get out of there. But after the guns are not pointed at us anymore and we're about to take off, I ask him, why did you stop us? And he says something about, well, we don't know if they're terrorists. You could be terrorists. We don't know what's going on, so we have to stop and check. And I said, well, if we were some good old boys in a 4x4 pickup truck with a gun mounted on the back of our windshield, I don't think you would have stopped us. He's like, well, I don't know about that. We take off, pull up towards the hill, and leave there with our lives. And every day or so, I have to cross that bridge, and I see the sign that says Treasure Island exit. And it reminds me of the time that me doing everything I was supposed to could have got me killed. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Boots Riley.